Hi everybody. In in my last video, that's why I called it 7A, part 7A, all of a sudden the video stopped recording. So I don't know why. I thought I'd try something new and direct load a video, record a video directly onto YouTube because it's quicker to upload. So I don't know if that's got anything to do with it or for any other reason. I never touched it, it just cut off all of a sudden. So apologies about that. So that's why this is now called part 7B. Anyway, as I was trying to do is to come up with an explanation about what diminished and augmented chords are and how to actually find them on your chord harmonica. And as you've seen in the last video, it very much takes to look at your chart all the time, because it's not as straightforward. The diminished and augmented chords on the bottom, draw chords, the layout is not as straightforward as any of the other chords. It's not in the circle or fifths or anything like that. It's just got its own order. As you've probably also noticed is that the way I try to explain diminished and augmented chords, you probably guessed that I have not really studied music theory or chord theory or anything like that. I'm guessing if you are well into your chord theory and all that kind of stuff, this is probably just makes total perfect sense. You just have to find a way of getting used to it. But of course, I'm trying to cast my mind back to, say, about 10 years ago when I first started playing a chord harmonica, and then I thought, what can I make of these diminished and augmented chords? I've also been told at the time that quite a few chord players have their draw chords at the bottom body retuned to something else, like a minor seventh or I don't know, a sixth chord or something else. So even quite a few chord players don't quite always know what to do with these diminished and augmented chords. Anyway, so this is about the augmented chords, continuing from part 7A. As you noticed, diminished chords is fairly simple to find out where to find them. You've got any diminished chord, you always got two options available on your chord harmonica. If you look at the charts and see where they are, where you can find them, etc. Like I said, and this is a bit more complicated for augmented chords, there are 4 possible augmented chords, and of course you get 6 augmented chords offered on your chord harmonica. So it's a bit different. There is not 2 available options for every augmented chord. It's a bit different, and again the order in which they appear is does not exactly make a lot of sense. And of course the diminished and augmented chords is a lot about playing inversions if you need them. What I also find makes a difference is what type of chord harmonica you've got. Especially for the diminished chords. Like I said, you've always got 2 options. And which of those options sounds better, you just have to find that out for yourself. I personally think it also makes a difference which chord harmonica you're using. So, for example, if I play a B diminished chord, I can play a D diminished, or an A flat diminished. They sound quite different, and of course they sound different again on another chord harmonica. So you might decide, if you're using these diminished chords in some of your music, you might decide which one sounds better in a certain circumstance, and I think that could depend on what type of chord harmonica, what brand, make, model, etc. chord harmonica you've got. So you just got to find that out for yourself. Augmented chords, like I said, only consists of major third intervals. So the distance between each note is 2 whole notes or 4 semitones and a major third interval. So there is no interval pattern. That's why it's a different type of chord. It's not, you can't compare it to anything else. In my next video, my next one after this, I'm going to discuss a standard chord progression. This chord progression also kind of explains you where you can use diminished and augmented chords. And I believe that once you get used to where and how to use them, they really add value to your chord harmonica, I think, because you can do things that are not so easy on a guitar or any other chord instrument. So it really gives the chord harmonica an extra dimension, I think. I think so. So just briefly, where would you use a diminished chord and where would you use a augmented chord? Where? And again, in my next video I'm going to discuss this in the framework of a chord progression type of thing. There are also some exercises in my document on page 8 that include augmented chords. Have a look, try them out and just find them all. And again, this chart really is your good friend if you're not to just find it out, figure it out where your chords are. Also, what I've introduced in the last video the first time is that you can actually number your chord sections. So have I got it the wrong way around? No, I've got it right actually. So the way this chart works is just 2 halves. This is the first half and that's the second half. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Which is of course these 12 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's of course the layout of your chord harmonica. And that also brings me to the subject of using these this chart and playing your chords by tabs or your chord number, section number or something like that. It can help. And of course, you know, you can do things like a G major chord is section 8 or something, or an A minor chord is section 10, or you know, get certain numbers. So you'd be looking at section numbers rather than chords. But again, it's much better to actually study the chords themselves. Name your chords all the time, and do a couple of chromatic runs or something, you know. It actually gives you a much better understanding of where your chords are. But of course, in the beginning, especially for diminished and augmented chords, because they're not so straightforward to find, you can also use the numbers, of course, you know. Oh, I need an E augmented chord, and oh yeah, I need to go to section 11, so you know where it is, the second last one, or something like that. Anyway, it does help, and anything, of course, that helps to get you playing is a good thing. What I also want to say is I suggested doing chromatic runs, you know, on the major chords. So C, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, etc. Do the whole chromatic, all the major chords, then all the seventh chords, then all the minor chords. And I suggested you do that for diminished and augmented chords as well, although that is not as straightforward, especially sound-wise. And that is, of course, because in a lot of cases you need to play inversions, which means that the root note is not always at the bottom of the, or at the top of the chords. So you could be playing an E diminished, B diminished chord, but all you can hear is, what you can hear the best one is a D or an A flat or something like that. So it makes it not as straightforward to play chromatic runs on the diminished and augmented chords. It doesn't always sound like a chromatic run, whereas on the other chords it does. So not as straightforward. Definitely a lot easier. A lot more difficult, I mean, with the diminished and augmented chords. Something that's quite tricky to get your head around. So, one example where a diminished chord is used is, say, a lead to the root note from 7. Again, we're talking positions here, position 7 leading to 1. So, for instance, in the key of C, you would go from B diminished, to C. So basically it's like a lead chord that is leads to a seminote above. Actually works quite nicely. So you go, but again I'll come back to that in the chord progression in my next video. Where would you play an augmented chord? Now, one of the things that is the most obvious is to play it in the 5th position. So from 5th position, G in the key of C, that would be a G. So you would play it, instead of a G major chord, you can play a G augmented chord if your next chord is going towards C, the root note. So if you're going towards position 1, the 5th is a good chance to use an augmented chord. G augmented leading to C. So that's just as an example. Again, there is also an explanation in the document about how and where you can use diminished and augmented chords. Have a look and see if you can find something that suits you or where you would use them. But again, especially with the augmented chords, they are difficult to find. It's not so straightforward, but you have to sort of get used to them. And excuse me, so the odd numbers, if you use the tab numbers, you know, the section numbers or something, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, they are all the augmented chords, and the diminished chords are all on the odd numbers, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If you're using markers on your chord harmonica like I do here on this one, you know, and it's feeling your way around, of course, your diminished chords are always on the left of the marker, on the left, on the left, on the left, on the left. If you have to feel your way around, whereas augmented chords are always on the right, so not on the right of one of the markers. So just in case you use markers, they also help you to find them. And the last thing I've got to say about augmented chords, it's also a bit tricky, because if you get them wrong, if you play a wrong augmented chord, it can sound horrible. So please be careful with using augmented chords. And make sure you get the right ones to make any music that you write up. Then one last thing I want to say about the diminished chords. Anyone watching this video who knows a lot about chords, who has chord theory and everything, an augmented chord is actually circular. What do I mean by that? So you go up in whole major third intervals. So you would go from C, E, if you go up in whole in major third intervals, you'll find that the C is the first, then you get E, of course, then G sharp, and then C. C is the fourth note. So augmented chords are actually reversible. They're like circular chords type of thing. So you use the whole octave. A diminished chord officially is a little bit different. So officially a diminished chord only consists of 3 notes. Now of course, in most chord harmonicas you will have your diminished chords consists of 4 or 5 notes. So a diminished chord officially 3 notes, but the way it sounds on a chord harmonica with 4 notes sounds a bit different. You can still use them, of course, as diminished chords, but if you are a bit of a chord theory person and you know all your chord theory and stuff, you could argue that the diminished chords on a chord harmonica are not exactly diminished chords because they're not purely of 3 notes. What I would say is officially, if you look at it in a technical way, the diminished chords on a chord harmonica are actually minor 6th chords with a flattened 5th. So you get an M6 flat 5. That's the official name, how you would call these diminished chords. But again, that's for the people who know their chord theory and who like to have a bit of an argument. Right, that's so much about diminished and augmented chords. In my next video, that will be number 8 I think, yeah, I'll do a standard chord progression and show you how you can use your chords in a piece of music. See you in a bit.